Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 195, and today's date is October 22nd, 2013, and the title of this episode is The Next False Flag Event, a Nuclear Explosion. And before I get started, I just want to welcome all the new people who subscribe to YouTube. If you haven't visited the x22report.com site, please come and visit. I keep information on the site that has to do with potential false flags. I keep the dates and a running record of that. I also keep track of inflation or deflation on different products, and I keep a dynamic timeline on the economic collapse. And for those people who don't know, we also have a forum on the x22report.com site, and if you go over there, it is completely free. You can join up, you can use an alias name, and you can talk to other people, or just go on there and read what they have to say. And it's everyone on there talking about what is going on in the world, people from different countries talking about different things, and this is a place where we all can get together and talk about what is going on. Now, let's get into the economic collapse news, and we're going to head out to Greece, and we know that Greece is having major problems with debt, with unemployment, and right now the Greek people are 40% poorer than they were in 2008. And we have to remember, the Eurozone has been giving them bailout money, but asking them to provide cuts, lay off people, and we can see this model does not work. They are not better off than they were when they weren't getting bailouts. Actually, they're much worse. Unemployment is continually rising. They have so much debt now they can't pay it back, and what they've done is they've really bankrupted the country, and we are definitely seeing this happen not just in Greece. It will be happening in Cyprus, it will be happening in France, in Spain, in Portugal, all across Europe, and then eventually in the U.S., because we are all following the same exact model. And because of people not working in Greece, their disposable incomes fell by almost 30%, and since they don't have extra money, those businesses that sell TVs and all those other things, no one is going to go out and buy those, so those stores close down, and you pretty much have a domino effect, and it's completely unsustainable and cannot be sustained, and this is why we see this happening. And they can get another 12 different bailouts. It would not make any type of difference at this time. Here in the U.S., I've been discussing in my various reports that retail sales are slowing, and Deutsche Bank, they have done an analysis, and they're seeing that mall traffic is declining, and it is much lower than it was compared to other years, because what they're saying is stores like Macy's, Kohl's, JCPenney, Nordstrom's, the big anchor stores that you see in malls are reporting that their sales are declining. And what we're seeing is people are not shopping at those stores, but shopping at discount stores instead, because their money goes further. And all of this that you can see, that what is going on here is that here in the U.S., disposable income is being reduced because of high unemployment, high underemployment, and people who have that used to have full-time jobs are now working 1, 2, or 3 part-time jobs and still not making the same amount of money that they were making when they had the full-time job. And then you have those who just do not look anymore because there are just no jobs out there that they can find at this time. And right now we're seeing department store revenues have fallen by negative 3.2%, and we're seeing that many retail stores and many financial analysts are saying that this holiday season these stores are not going to do well, and we're probably going to see many of them close down. Now, we got the unemployment numbers. They came out, and lo and behold, they were below expectation, but unemployment rate drops by 7.2%. So they expected 180,000 jobs, but they only received 148, and we know this is all completely rigged. And the unemployment rate now has dropped, and this was before the shutdown of the government. So now what we're going to see next time is they're going to make the case that because of the shutdown, unemployment is either going to stay the same or inch up a little bit, showing that the shutdown really had an effect. You know, those 16 days really had an effect on the economy, because let's use our common sense here. The government was shut down, and only about 6% of it was actually shut down. All the non-essential people were shut down, and they didn't give the payout to the employees that they furloughed, but they gave them back pay, and some employees even got to receive unemployment and keep the unemployment plus their back pay. So, yeah, that doesn't make sense why that would have any effect on the economy for 16 days. And let's see, they paid people to move barriers back and forth to close the national monuments where there was no one there anyhow, so that didn't do anything. They kept the servers running for all the websites and put up a splash page, and I proved that all these servers and everything were running, so they didn't even shut that down to save money, so everything was up and running. And so what effect does this have on the economy? Wait, the Fed? Nope, the Fed was still printing $85 billion a month, pouring, actually probably a lot more, but that's what they're telling us, pouring that money, buying up the toxic real estate, buying the treasury bonds. So what actually is the problem here of these 16 days? I mean, the Fed is even blaming the September taper on the shutdown that happened in October. It doesn't make any sense. This is all baloney. It's an illusion to throw everyone off the track and make people believe that the economy is declining right now. But we know better. We know this was happening back in the summer, even back further than that. And this is why they were out there using propaganda to convince everyone that the economy was getting better, because they thought they had this Syrian event in the bag, and this is what they were going to use for the collapse. And what we're seeing right now is that back in July and August, there were 89.9 million people who are no longer in the labor force, and that grew in August to 90.4 million. And now in September, it grew from 90.4 million to 90.6 million, and that is an increase of 136,000 people. And we have to look at this. These people are no longer in the labor force because there is no job. They've given up. There is nothing out there. They're continually sending resumes out, getting no responses. I know a couple of people that are in the technology industry, and they've been sending resumes out like 5 to 10 a week, and most of them are headhunters or consulting firms that place you in jobs, and it seems like they're just collecting people's names and resumes, but never coming back and responding to these people with any type of job. And this just goes to show you that there is no work out there. And we have to remember, when President Obama took office back in January 2009, there was 80.5 million people that were not in the labor force. And today, it has increased by 10.1 million during Obama's presidency. So we can see what the problem is here. Now, I've said in the past that the United States is using military might to keep the dollar propped up. And we understand this, that the United States is in the Middle East, moving into Africa to capture the natural resources. We understand this. And we understand that China and Russia right now are using their negotiation abilities, and they're making deals without using soldiers to usher in the next world reserve currency. And what we're seeing, and just to say this, the U.S. did this in the 70s where they actually made deals. They didn't use military might. They were making deals all over the place, and to become the U.S. reserve currency in 1971 when Nixon took the country off the gold standard and stole all the other nations' gold. And at that time, they were making deals all over the place to back it up with the petrodollar. Now, was that the right thing? No. But we can see China right now making deals all over the place. And they have just made another deal with Singapore, and they have agreed to trade their currencies directly, making Southeast Asian city another offshore hub for the Chinese yuan. And we have to remember they've done this with Kenya also, where they are a clearinghouse. And what this means is they are going to bypass the U.S. dollar. And right now, the UK is easing their rules for Chinese banks. And they want them to come in and set up in London because they understand, I don't know how much longer the U.S. dollar is going to be the reserve currency, so we better cover ourselves and bring in the Chinese banks. The same thing's happening with Australia, the same thing in North Korea, Brazil, all these different areas. Everyone is making deals and doing things that they normally would not do. And another move to promote the yuan globally, the country agreed on a currency swap with the EU earlier in the month, and this was a 350 billion yuan deal that bypassed the U.S. dollar. So we can definitely see what is happening right now. We can see China is making its move, and the U.S., the central bankers, are not going to let this happen. They will go down kicking and screaming, and actually the kicking and screaming will turn into World War III. And this is why the U.S. forces with other private Western central bank countries are encircling China right now and preparing for what is coming. Okay, let's move on. Now, Dianne Feinstein is out there, and she's saying that the NSA snooping isn't surveillance. It's, we're not really doing any type of surveillance. We're just, the NSA is just collecting phone records. It's not really surveilling any of it, and it's an essential tool to combat terrorism. And she goes on to say that the call records program is not surveillance. It does not collect the content of any communication, nor do the records include names or locations. The NSA only collects the type of information found on a telephone bill. And I remember saying this in one of my previous reports, that this is what they're actually doing, is recording the phone number and recording the location and the time they spent on the call, and that's all they're doing. Well, let's just think about this for a second. The U.S. government spent billions upon billions of dollars to do what the phone company's already doing. Does that make sense to anyone? Why didn't they just say, hey, can you give us a printout? We need it from this time period. First of all, what information does a phone number, a location, and the time duration tell you? If you were looking at massive printouts, that tells you absolutely nothing. You don't know who's involved in the conversation. You don't know who they're talking to. You don't know what the conversation's about. This is a bunch of baloney. This is meaningless. This is to throw everyone off the track of what the NSA is actually doing. And what are they doing? They are spying on everyone around the world, especially the Americans. They are looking at the conversations. They are recorded. They know who you are talking to. There is no reason to create this entire system to collect phone numbers, the location, and the duration if phone companies already have the information. It makes no sense. Plus, all of this is a violation of the Fourth Amendment. Now, speaking of violation of the Fourth Amendment, TSA is actually accessing government and private databases to pre-screen everyone when you take a flight. And the New York Times is reporting this, that they are learning a lot more about everyone who flies in the U.S. Now, and what they're collecting and the information that they're using is like tax identification numbers, old travel plans, property records, and even physical characteristics are contained in these databases. And this goes on to say that they're even collecting information that has to do with debt collectors and other private agencies who depend on digging up personal information. So they're trying to create a profile and put you in a certain category if you're leaning toward that terrorist type of profile, which makes no sense because this information actually really tells you nothing. Because if you really look around the U.S. and if you're really looking at debt collectors and if you're looking at people who've taken trips before or your property records, I mean, most of the people, think about all the foreclosures and all the people that have bad debt right now. What is this going to tell them? Nothing. What it does is it lets the information flow in, and they're able to create social profiles of Americans to put them on lists, to put them who they talk to and who they're associated with, who they're going to hotels with, and things like that. But this is not to stop any type of terrorism in the U.S. Now, the Fed, the FBI, the DHS, TSA, they keep on coming up with more and more new rules to identify terrorists. Now, Department of Homeland Security and the FBI warn right now people in possession of large amounts of weapons and ammunition could be a possible terrorist and is an indicator of criminal or terrorist activity. Well, I know many people who are gun enthusiasts that love to collect old and new guns, and they have quite a bit of ammo for each one. But guess what? They keep it locked up. They're not a terrorist. They were actually veterans. And this is completely here to look at those Americans and those veterans who have lots of weapons, because we have to remember their main goal right now, and we know it's pending in the Senate, the gun bill, the UN, and the UN Arms Treaty, and we're seeing many different events unfold now. We just had the shooting in Nevada, we had the shooting in D.C., and in August we had some type of shooting in Georgia, and they're building up and trying to make the case of getting this UN Arms Treaty and gun bill passed in the U.S. Senate. And this is what they're trying to do at this point. And according to the FBI and DHS right now, weapons could be stored in an individual's home storage facility or vehicle and may include common firearms such as rifles, shotguns, pistols, as well as military-grade weapons. The illegal possession of large amounts of ammunition is also listed as a potential indicator of criminal weapon possession related to terrorism. And the bulletin never clarifies what they mean by large. Is it 2 guns? Is it a pistol and a shotgun? Is it 2 shotguns? Is it 3 shotguns? Is it 1 shotgun? Is it 1 pistol? It doesn't even tell you. And the unusual quantity of ammunition, they don't have a specific answer for that either. It just says if you have quite a bit of ammunition. So it makes no sense whatsoever, and it really doesn't tell you anything. It is something they're going to use to help them collect the people when the collapse comes, and this is why they're putting this out there right now. Plus, many veterans and many people who are not veterans, do have many types of guns. I mean, I have two. I know people that have three, four, five. That doesn't mean you're a terrorist. It doesn't mean that you're going to use it for terrorist activities. But they want to find out who have these weapons, and they're trying to create these lists. And when they talk about terrorists, they're talking about domestic terrorists. And this is what they're really concerned about. And this is why the DHS was created. This is why the TSA is there. This is why FEMA was created. This is why we see all of this happening right now. And we understand that there was a mass shooting that happened in Nevada, and Holder was out there, and he's concerned about the threat of active shooter, and he's very concerned about these mass shootings, and they would like to start this new program called Trapwire, which is a Big Brother control software, and it's unique predictive software system designed to detect patterns of pre-attack surveillance. Now, this sounds to me like Minority Report, trying to predict who is a threat and come and collect them before they actually even do anything. And what this is a system of interconnected nodes that spot information that is considered to be suspect and then inputs it into the system to be analyzed and compared with data entered from other areas within a network for the purpose of identifying patterns of behavior that are indicative of pre-attack planning. And Holder stated that the action needed to be taken is tougher gun control measures along with Trapwire, and he urged lawmakers to take on tough political work necessary to break the gridlock in Washington around the gun issue. And what is he saying? He is saying, let's get the UN Arms Treaty and the gun bill passed. And if this latest event doesn't push this through, which I don't think it will, there will be another one, because their main goal is to get the weapons away from the veterans and the rest of America, because this is their worst fear, is to have the people join together and unseat the government officials from their positions. Because once these people have power, they do not want to be removed. And how do we know that they are afraid of people, the domestic populace, rising up against the government? Well, we see IRS and Social Security and other agencies training with weapons. We understand that they have been given weapons, and right now the Homeland Security is hiring armed guards to protect IRS and other government buildings, and they're spending $80 million to hire these guards to protect the IRS and other government buildings in upstate New York against public demonstrations, civil disturbances, or anything that might happen. And you can go on the Federal Business Opportunities website. It is posted there, and I have the link on the x22report.com site. If you just go to this episode today, click on the episode link, let the page open full, and scroll down, you'll see the Federal Business Opportunities website, and they do have it on there. And what it goes on to say is that under emergency security services, deployments may be to large and small-scale events such as natural disasters, civil disturbances, or other unanticipated events on an as-needed basis. And they want these security people armed and ready and trained. So what are they really afraid of? Why would they need all of this? That is the big question, and we know what the answer is. Now, we understand in Syria that John Kerry, Susan Rice, the Obama administration, they want Assad out. They want him removed from the government so they can put in a puppet government that will put the natural resources of Syria using the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency. And we understand that. Now the foreign ministers of Western and Arab countries who support the rebels, which are the paid mercenaries, they're saying that President Assad can have no role in the future Syrian government. They want him removed also because we have to remember Saudi Arabia and all the other Arab countries depend on the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency. They are becoming very wealthy with it, and if the dollar is not propped up, it will start to collapse, and they understand this, and this is why they need to get into Syria and Iran. And now they're making the move saying they need Assad out. Okay, let's move on here. Now, we understand that CISPA is still pending in the Senate. That bill is waiting for the perfect event to happen. And it's just sitting there waiting. And what is happening right now is that cyber attack information is only supposed to be shared in emergencies. So they would have to wait for a cyber attack to occur, and then the private companies can share their information. What the CISPA bill wants to do is make it so these companies are legally protected and they're able to share the information before the attack happens. So we can kind of figure out what they're going to try to do. They're going to create a cyber attack event, and we know this is coming. Do we know exactly when? No, we don't. But we do know that something is in the works. With this event, it will allow them to say, listen, we just had an event. If we were able to share information from all these companies, and if we passed CISPA, we could have prevented this cyber attack from happening. And this is how they're probably going to play this. Because right now they have to wait for after the cyber attack to share the private information of individuals from the companies. So this is how they're going to try to rework this. And we do have to remember that the president has already created the executive orders to support the CISPA bill. And you know, even though he says he's going to veto it, why would he create the executive orders to support it? Because guess what's going to happen? When the cyber attack hits, and it's a huge event and it brings down the financial institution, which will be the first part of the mini collapse that I've been talking about coming up, this late fall, early winter, or maybe, into January. Their deadline has been pushed back a little bit, but it's going to happen. Don't you worry. The president was going to say he was going to veto it, but because of these circumstances right now with this horrific cyber attack that brought the economy to its knees, I'm going to have to pass this bill because we need the American people to feel secure in their banking, in the financial industry, and we cannot allow another country to do this to us again. And that's why he has the executive order already set up to support the CISPA bill. And this is the move he is going to make. And don't worry, it will all be for the people. And this is why he's doing it. Now, there are many, many more glitches happening in the East Coast Internet hemisphere right here. And we see Time Warner had a massive outage in the New York Northeast region. And that included like New York, Brooklyn, Astoria, Albany, Portland, Flushing, this whole entire area. And they had some type of outage, and it was like a glitch, and people couldn't get their data. Everything was just down. And they're saying that due to technical issues with one of our network backbone providers, these issues affected other internet providers in the area also. And what they did was they rerouted the traffic, and they're using a different system right now, and they're still looking into what exactly happened. Now, we understand that we've been seeing many, many glitches in the NASDAQ, in many huge website companies where they've been down for a little bit, then they came back up. The NASDAQ has had a couple of glitches, and we can see all of a sudden they're all happening in the same time period. And this could have been an introduction of some type of malware, which it would cause a hiccup for a couple seconds, and then once everything is in place, everything goes back to normal. And we can see that something is definitely getting ready, and they're positioning things to happen. And a National Academies report pointed out that cyber attacks are unlikely to cause extended outages. But if they were well coordinated, they could magnify the damage of a physical attack. A hacker attack on the power system could deny large regions of the country access to bulk system power for weeks or even months, which would generate turmoil, widespread public fear, and an image of helplessness that would play directly into the hands of the terrorists. And we see many different organizations coming out explaining the same exact things, and we just recently saw that there is a huge vulnerabilities in the power grid. It was brought to the DHS attention, and they pretty much did nothing about it. They didn't even acknowledge it, and we can see how this whole entire false flag event is going to play out. Now, we do understand that the food stamp amount is going to be reduced come November 1st, and there's approximately about 47.6 million Americans on food stamps. And we saw what happened when there was a time period when there was just a little glitch of the food stamp system, and they said it had to do with backups and things like that, but who knows again? I mean, there could have been something being implanted at the time, and we're just seeing another glitch happen. And we saw how people reacted. Now that that food, as we know, is rising, it's food is not going down, or the products are being shrunk down in size to keep the price the same, so people are receiving less of the same product. And that's a good example of is Breyer's ice cream. It's no longer a half gallon. It's much smaller than that, and other people have been telling me that other products have been shrinking down. I also noticed tissues, where I used to get a family pack, I took out a box, compared it to the new family size, and it is much, much smaller, but the price is the same. And for those products that they haven't reduced sizes, we've seen prices move up. So now they are reducing the amount of money that these people are going to receive, and right now some people have explained to me that the food stamp money only lasts until like the third week of October. Can you imagine what it would be like to have less of the food stamp money? They might only make it 2 weeks now, or 2.5 weeks. And what everyone is concerned about is that these people who are on food stamps, the 47.6 million people, this might turn into a riot type of event where people march and people demand their food stamp money back. And what is amazing is that they cut back the food stamp program, but they have no problem sending billions of dollars to Israel, billions of dollars to Saudi Arabia. They were sending billions of dollars to Egypt, and I think still some is still going there. They're spending billions of dollars in Yemen, in Pakistan, and this is what they're cutting out. I don't know about you, but I do not want my tax money going to these other countries, and we do understand why they are sending this aid out there. It is to keep the puppet governments in power, to keep the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency, and to keep these governments happy, and to keep those people in the country from rising up and overthrowing the government in those countries. And we can see what is happening and why they are doing it, because they are losing. The dollar is declining. They are losing the battle, and it's getting tougher and tougher to keep the U.S. dollar propped up in these countries. And this is why we see these drone strikes and all of this happening. Because it's to keep the other people in the country from rising up and overthrowing the puppet governments in these countries. And that's why we see it happening in Yemen, Pakistan, and all these other countries. But going back to the food stamps, we could see something, and something might happen. And let me tell you, the government would really probably want this to happen at this point, so they could declare martial law. They would like nothing better than to do that and switch and move all power and invoke the executive orders and move the power to President Obama, where he doesn't have to deal with Congress, where he just completely bypasses Congress and he just makes all the decisions. Now, we saw a terrorist attack in Russia, and Putin is blaming foreign forces for turning Islam aggressions in Russia. And what he goes on to say is some political forces are using Islam, to be more precise, its radical movements that have never been popular among Russian Muslims, to weaken our state and to create regions with foreign managed conflicts on Russian territory. Well, what I'm seeing here is that central bankers, Saudi Arabia, are very angry for what Russia did with Syria, that they derailed the plan of having a war started, and they are now moving these terrorists into Russia as a warning of not to do this again. And what we are seeing is that back in my report, I don't know, it must have been when the Kenya attack hit in the Kenya Mall, and they're saying that the White Widow is the new Osama bin Laden, who's the leader of the Al-Shabaab terrorist group. Well, what they're saying now is that the White Widow is suspected in this blast, and they are building up the case that this White Widow has reach all over the world and can get terrorists into Russia. And they are building this up because we understand that there is going to be a major event. And there's also that warning in Uganda that there's going to be another terrorist threat, and it's imminent, and it's going to happen. So we can see how they're playing this out. And the question is, what is going to be the next false flag event? And I've said in my other reports that it is going to be a multiple event. It'll probably be a cyber attack with a nuclear type of explosion, or maybe biological or chemical. Don't know, but it looks like it might be moving to nuclear at this point. And the reason why I say this, we have to look at all the facts that we see right now. We understand that nuclear weapons were transferred without paperwork. We understand that high U.S. Armed Forces personnel were relieved of command that handled the nuclear arsenals, and they were removed from their command. We had Lindsey Graham out there screaming on the top of his lungs that Iran could be sending over a nuclear bomb into the harbor of Charleston, or maybe into Manhattan. And we understand that they're in the process of going through the peace talks with Iran, and Iran is actually making a deal with the BRIC nation, which would then allow them to bypass the sanctions of the U.S. So there's a small window right here, and we understand that also that Iran is not going to go and give up their nuclear program. And there is a small window. And there's also Israel, who is looking to do a preemptive strike on Iran without the U.S. But again, the U.S. has a treaty with with Israel that if they're fighting Iran, U.S. would help out. So you can see how all this plays out. So right now what is happening is that malware has infected the UN Nuclear Agency computer. Malicious software infected some UN Nuclear Agency computers in recent months, but they believe no data was compromised. They're not exactly sure. And what does this UN Nuclear Agency do? Well, the UN International Atomic Energy Agency plays a key role in global efforts to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons. They keep track of everything. And it just so happens that they had a malicious piece of malware introduced into their computer network, which either erased, moved, destroyed, retrieved this critical information, but they believe nothing has gone, or maybe it just copied it. Who knows? But something is definitely happening right now, and we can definitely see that something is ramping up. And I've said this in many, many reports. All of this is leading to something that's going to be very big, because they understand that they tried using false flag events in other countries. The American people just don't care to go to war. You can have 1,700 chemical attacks, biological attacks in Syria or Iran. They can scream on the top of their lungs that Iran is going to have a nuclear weapon, and they can say this for over 25 years. But guess what? The American people don't care. And guess what? They have been saying it for over 25 years. They've been telling us that they'll have a bomb in 3 to 5 years. And they just recently came out and said it again. But they don't care. The only way that Americans will be shocked is if something happens here on American soil. And it would have to be something that is horrific. It would have to be in the way 9/11 happened. It would have to be catastrophic. The buildings coming down, the planes hitting, planes around the country, creating fear that terrorists are all over the place. They have already reported that Al-Qaeda are now in lone wolf groups. They can't be traced. They're around the country. Al-Shabaab has been recruiting from the U.S., and they are growing and getting more sophisticated along with Al-Qaeda. The Al-Qaeda leader has already issued a warning that they are going to do small attacks on U.S. soil. Now we see all of this evidence about nuclear weapons being moved without paperwork. We're seeing U.S. military being relieved of command. We're seeing the UN Nuclear Agency computer infected with a malware type of piece of software that they are not sure exactly what happened. And we can see that something is being set up to create this terror that will be coming to the U.S. And again, this is not going to be a one-off thing. We're going to most likely see a cyber attack on the financial system and the power grid. We will see most likely some type of nuclear detonation. And it could be in two places. There could be a chemical detonation to go along with this. I mean, if we look at 9/11 and we look at that, we saw anthrax, we saw many different things happen all at once. So we need to be ready. We need to understand what is going on, and we need to call them out on this and get more and more people to understand that these events are coming. And the more that we talk about it, the more that we get out there, we'll let them know that we are on to them. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.